Tonight we are in Lockerbie, a town in the south of Scotland forever linked to one of the UK's worst terrorist attacks. The memory of the people who died is still honoured here, but in the 37 years since, Lockerbie has also moved forward. Last week the town's biggest employer announced £144 million worth of investment in what will be one of the UK's biggest cheese-making facilities. Well, tonight we're joined in the historic town hall by people of different political persuasions from across Dumfriesshire who've come to have their say on the big issues of the day. Welcome to Debate Night. Debate Night is where you get to ask the big questions, answering them on our panel this evening. From Scottish Labour, Monica Lennon is MSP for Central Scotland. Elected to Holyrood almost 10 years ago, Monica stood to be party leader 4 years ago but was defeated by Anas Sarwar. She's been named by Vogue as one of the top 12 women who changed the world for the better following her campaign to end period poverty. From the Scottish Conservatives, Finlay Carson is the MSP for Galloway and West Dumfries and convener of the Rural Affairs, Island and Natural Environment Committee at Holyrood. Finlay studied agriculture and worked on his family's farm before setting up his own IT business, then entering politics a decade ago. From Reform UK, Councillor Thomas Kerr. Thomas started his political life campaigning for Labour before joining the Scottish Conservatives, where he became the leader of the Tory group on Glasgow City Council. In January this year, he defected to Reform UK, saying he believed the party offered Scotland a platform for meaningful change. Also with us tonight from the SNP, Emma Harper is MSP for South Scotland. Before entering politics, Emma spent over 30 years working as a nurse in the UK and the United States. And finally tonight, we're joined by podcaster Sean McDonald. His series Blethered claims to have interesting conversations with fascinating people, with guests ranging from footballers and comedians to politicians, including First Minister John Swinney. But tonight, he is our guest. Please welcome them all to Debate Night. And welcome to our studio audience here in Lockerbie. It's great to be with you for the first time. And you can join in the discussion from home, wherever you happen to be watching tonight. BBCDN is the hashtag you need if you're on social media. And our podcast of the show will be available for you to download straight after the broadcast. We've got a lot to get through tonight in Lockerbie. So let's get started. Our first question comes from Karen Thompson. Evening, Karen.
Hiya. I'm just curious about your new GP and walk-in centres that are being proposed, and I think in principle it's a great idea, but wondering how efficient they'll be and how they'll be funded when we're having staffing issues at the moment in the GP services we've got.
Thank you, Karen. Earlier this week at the SNP conference, John Swinney announced a network of 15 new drop-in centres aiming to deliver 1 million new appointments across the country. Emma Harper, you're a former nurse yourself. How's this going to work, and how's it going to be different?
Okay, so it's a great question, actually, because we know we've got challenges across Scotland for people accessing GPs. One of the biggest challenges is the 8 o'clock in the morning rush for people to get an appointment, either before they go to work or to, just to get advice or whatever. So my understanding is that not all 15 will be up and running at once, that this will be taken forward in partnership with engagement with the GPs. We've already got more GPs per head population in Scotland compared to the other parts of the UK, and we've got more GPs in training. There's about 1,200 that are about to qualify, and of course we've got the Scottish Graduate Entry to Medicine programme in Scotland, which is unique to Scotland as well.
Emma, so the GPs say they weren't consulted on this, and we have less GPs now than we did a decade ago. So how's this going to be different? How's it going to make a difference if we don't have the staff for it? We don't have enough nurses either in Scotland.
Well, the GPs, as I said, are in training, and there's GPs that would be potentially looking forward to come back into some even part-time working. This is not to replace the current services. The current GPs are working really well in primary care, and of course they need support and funding in order to deliver the care they need as well. But this plan, as I understand it, is to help as an adjunct and not to replace current GP services. This will be something that will make it more available for people to have access to a GP up until 8 p.m, whether it's Monday night all the way through to a Sunday. So I'm sure that engagement will be made. We have heard that the Scottish Government will work with the GPs, so Royal College of GPs, for instance, in order to look at how to develop this as the best way forward.
Okay, we don't know where they're going to be yet, so maybe there'll be one in this neck of the woods. Lady with the blonde hair. Yes, on you go.
Thank you. I would suggest that as part of my job for the NHS is recruiting GPs.
Oh, really?
Yes. Sadly, it's not going to be quite as easy as Emma suggests. We might have a lot of GPs, but they tend to be located in large urban areas, and rural areas really have a dearth of GPs. We cannot recruit to rural areas. So I'm wondering whether having walk-in centres or GP centres, although it sounds like a great idea, is actually going to solve the problem, because you're fishing in the same pool that we're currently fishing in to staff our GP surgeries. And not only that, you don't always need a GP. You need multidisciplinary professionals, an AMP, physio, pharmacist, may be the best person to help you. So by staffing them with GPs that we don't have, it's not going to solve all of the problems that we have in primary care.
Okay. In your experience, what's the problem with getting enough GPs? Why are they not coming through the system?
I think because it takes a long time to create a GP. They have to become a doctor first and then do an extra training to become a GP. You find that younger GPs often don't want to be partners in practices. They would rather be salaried GPs, and there's not as many of those vacancies available. And they don't want to work in rural areas because sadly we still think in silos, and we don't offer them the exciting opportunities that they might want and come to the areas for. We're offering them the same old, sadly. And the NHS needs to think differently about how we offer those services in primary care.
Okay, right, a lot of issues there. Thank you very much indeed for that contribution. Finlay Carson, the headline on this, you must welcome this. 1 million extra appointments across Scotland. That's good news, isn't it, for these people and others?
Well, it's headline grabbing, but this is typical of an SNP back of the fag packet policy that's really not been thought out. We've heard they didn't even consult GPs. The facts are we've got 10% less GP practices in Scotland than we did 10 years ago. We had Nicola Sturgeon commit to 800 new GPs by 2026, I believe, and a report has shown they're falling well behind, well off track on delivering that. So rather than supporting the GPs who are facing burnout at the moment, this is just a headline grabber before an election. Sadly, we do have issues with workforce planning, but that's 18 years of SNP failing to deliver the workforce that we need to deliver the GP services that we all expect. And the lady there was quite right. It's not just the GPs, it's the advanced nurse practitioners, it's the pharmacists, it's the mental health
So what's your plan to solve all this? What are you going to be telling people at the election next May that you're going to do to fix this?
Well, the Scottish Conservatives have committed to ring-fence money to dealing with the appointment system, but not in a flyaway, let's get a headline basis. We're actually going to work with GPs to find out where the pinch points are. And we do need to make sure that we get GPs who are trained and qualified to come down to rural areas because, you know, once you're down here, a lot of them don't want to leave because it's such a nice place to work. But we need to make sure we get the workforce planning right, and we need to start somewhere. And this policy from the SNP is certainly not a policy that's going to deliver in rural Dumfries and Galloway.
Okay, all right, let me hear from the lady on the aisle, right in the middle. Yeah, there you go.
I suppose I was just wondering how these walk-in GPs would safeguard those appointments so we don't end up with really long wait times for them like we do currently in sort of A&E and minor injuries, and if money that's sort of being earmarked for these walk-in services might be better spent in currently supporting our GPs and A&E to reduce those wait times so people are seen in a more timely manner without a whole new system having to be created. Okay,
I'll come back to you on this, Emma, in just a second. Monica Lennon, this system works south of the border. Why shouldn't it work in Scotland?
Well, I'm not sure that's what the evidence says. I think we'd need to look at that more closely. But at the end of the day, the points have been made well tonight that there's been a real lack of consultation and discussion with GPs and other healthcare professionals, with the trade union like the BMA, but with patients as well, because I think people want to have that access to their own family doctor, their own GP, rather than go to another centre. there's been a conference, the SNP have had a conference. It does feel like it's about getting the headlines and having something to announce, but it's too important.
You need to get some headlines and have something to announce ahead of next May. What's it going to be? How are you going to sort this?
Well, Scottish Labour's already set out our plans to end this 8 a.m. scramble to get a GP appointment, and I feel the stress of that too as someone who's had to go to the doctors a few times recently. But that's about looking at the systems that our doctors and other healthcare workers are operating within. Look at the GP contract. We've set out that we'll do that, but that's not really a headline grabber. That's maybe quite boring, but it's really important to get that right, because as the woman said in the audience, why are GPs not wanting to come in to general practice? And partly that responsibility of being a partner and having responsibilities for the building, the property and all of that. When people want to provide healthcare, they're passionate about their patients. So if more people say, well, I would do it if I could be a salaried GP, we need to look at that. But the question about how it would work in practice, I mean, 15 of these walk-in centres, that sounds like a lot, but we've got 32 local authorities in Scotland. You know, is it going to work in Lanarkshire, where I live? Is it going to work in Lockerbie? What we really need is every community have proper access to the healthcare that they need. And, you know, just this week I had a family member who had a health emergency and the paramedics came out, and the conversation was very much along the lines of, we could take you to the hospital right now, but you'll sit in A&E for a very long time, and actually that'll be really distressing. You might be better to wait to 8 in the morning to phone your doctor, because the paramedics know themselves that you get up to the hospital and you might be able to walk in, but you're going to sit for a very, very long time. So I just worry that the SNP government have possibly raised expectations here, but they haven't done the hard work and the homework to make sure that this is actually deliverable.
All right, let me hear from the people in the audience who are the ones who are looking for these appointments. A man at the back.
Yes, I'm getting this 8 a.m. scramble we're always hearing about. I'm certainly lucky with the medical centre I'm with. You can phone the GP up at 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock, and he'll phone you back that afternoon. And as you're saying, going to the A&E and sitting for hours on end and all, I went up last week with a knee injury. I was seen within 20 minutes and I was back out within half an hour. Okay. All seen, all sorted.
Thank you, thank you. Man in the middle there, yeah, on you go.
Yeah, I think it's, what I'm hearing is that we're going to look at it and there are problems, but I'm not hearing any solutions. So it would be great to hear from the MSPs, what are the solutions to the problem that you're faced with?
Okay, I will press them more in a second, but let me hear from the lady in the second row before we do that. On you go.
Do you not think it's time that the NHS was taken out of politics altogether? Because even when a positive ideas come up, the only thing the other parties want to do is slag it off. So why not get the experts that know the NHS well and make a long-term plan so that it's not going to be changed every 5 years when governments change, although the SNP have been in for a long time.
Thank you, thank you. Thomas Kerr, not an MSP at the moment, but hoping to be one next May, and I think you have decided you are going to stand.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
But I'd rather talk about GPs than
confirm. Well, no, but
yeah,
this may be in your responsibility sphere next year. Is this beyond politics? Should it be beyond politics, the NHS?
It should be. And let me say one thing, because the lady's right, absolutely right, about how the NHS becomes a political football. If this works, I do welcome this. So if this does work, then absolutely this is the sort of thing that Scotland should have, because it happens in England. It's something that's already happening down south of the border and is working. But what we're hearing from Emma and what we heard from John Swinney is that we don't know where they're going to be. We don't know how much it's going to cost, and we don't know whether or not GPs have been consulted properly. GPs have come out and said they've not. So what I see this as is a First Minister who has ran out a road after nearly 2 decades in charge and is now trying to come up with policies to fix problems that he's already created. That's what I see this as. And if we had proper thought-out process, if they'd consulted properly with health professionals, if they consulted properly with patients, then we maybe could believe that this is going to fix it.
So what's your plan?
I don't see that. Well, what we need to do is, I mean, to be fair, I think there will be a lot of unity on this panel about how we try and fix some of the issues that GPs are bringing. Here in rural areas in particular, it's about trying to make it more attractive for people to come down and want to work, because as Finlay says, when people come in areas like this, they want to stay, but it's trying to make it attractive.
How do you do that?
So one of the biggest barriers, that's one of the biggest barriers that we actually have, is that those who are currently studying medicine are leaving the country. So they're studying medicine in our universities, but they're then leaving to go south of the border or to other places across the world. Part of the reason is because Scotland is so high tax. So if you want to convince people to stay here, let's make sure you deal with the big issues and convince people to stay in the country. That's how you start to fix the problem.
Sean McDonald, GP walk-in centres, good idea?
I think in principle, yes, and I think the SNP have to be commended for trying to find some sort of solution. For me as an observer who doesn't really have any skin in the game with any political party, I'm looking at it and I'm thinking maybe you should have consulted with GPs because it has to be collaborative, surely, if you really want to execute that properly. I mean, is it going to work? I'm not too sure. I think the point you just made there about I'm sick of seeing it being used as a political football. And these are services that the only difference between me and the people sitting here is I just happen to be sitting up here on the panel. And these are services that we rely on. And I think people who are deeply principled will commit to collaboration. I think politics has to be collaborative. There has to be some sort of cooperation, even if it means there are only incremental gains and improvements. And I think people that have shallow convictions and principles will then refuse to cooperate. And when I see this constant, continuous rabble and sort of just trying to point score, well, nothing is actually improving, I'm sitting here wondering, well, are these my options? Are these, you know, is this what I have on offer when I go to the polling booth? It's a wee bit, it's frustrating.
OK, let me hear from more people in the audience. Lady with the blonde hair again. Yeah, on you go. Yes.
Thank you. Let's not forget that the Health Committee is multi-party, so there are representatives from most of the parties on the Health Committee. But yes, it does become a political football about what hasn't been achieved more than what has been achieved.
Have you heard anything tonight that gives you hope about this?
I don't think there's enough meat on the bone to understand what is planned by the SNP. I would love to think they had a solution, but let's not forget that GPs in primary care are one part of the whole jigsaw for patients. If you solve that, you put pressure somewhere else in the system. So we have to look at the system as a whole and the patient journey as a whole.
Okay.
And my last point is maybe a bit controversial, but we do actually have to educate people on which bit of the system is the best for them, because we see such a blockage in A&E, and that's not always the best place for people to go to get the care they need. So we do need to work with communities and work with charities, even third sector, to enable people to get the right care in the right place.
Thank you, thank you. Man on the second row here. Yeah.
The politicians we have at the moment running this country are barely capable of running the country. So I don't see how they can even consider that they can run the NHS. What we need to do is get people from private industry in, not privatise the NHS, but bring in private managers that recognise how an industry works and what efficiencies and inefficiencies need to be sorted out. Because that's what's wrong. The NHS is so top-heavy, you can't afford doctors and nurses.
Emma, I want to give final word on this to you. That lady whose job is recruiting GPs says this is going to be very, very difficult, especially in rural areas like this, where it's already hard enough to get GPs, never mind for additional services.
So I'm interested to hear about the actions of the ScotGem programme, because my understanding is that ScotGem's been really successful for Dumfries and Galloway. The whole purpose of ScotGem is to train graduates to enter into general practice to specifically focus on rural areas. And that is something that when we passed the legislation, because I was on Health Committee at the time, that this was particularly about recruiting for rural areas. So I know the policy has just been announced 48 hours ago, and so it's going to take engagement, which is what the Scottish Government said that they'll do. They're going to engage with GPs, Royal College of GPs, and the other people that will be involved. We do have multidisciplinary team investment in our GP practices now. You know, we've got mental health workers, we've got welfare support workers as well.
Pharmacists
and
too.
Pharmacists, of course, as well. So there's been a lot of work over the last few years looking at how do we support people to, you know, open the door in order to get to the right care. Okay. And so that's something that in my work in Health Committee in this Parliament session, last Parliament session, we've done a lot of work at looking at how do we streamline things, how do we support how the health service has evolved so that we can focus on prevention and treatment in the first place, rather than wait to get to the emergency room.
Just briefly, Finlay.
Just a positive comment. We hear often about health being a political football, but I'd like to say that locally it's not always like that. So Emma and I work regularly together looking at health issues. We've got some fantastic GP practices. I'm lucky enough to come from Gatehouse in Kirkcudbright, and I very rarely have to wait for an appointment. And the joined up working between the community pharmacists, the GPs, whatever, works really well. But Emma and I have been working on looking at maternity services in Stranraer. So there is that non-political football game. That's not always happening, you know, and I'm quite proud to say that we work together to look at all the good examples of where healthcare works locally.
That's good to hear.
And we try to get that message up to those at the top of the party.
What's it like where you are in Scotland? Hashtag is BBCDN on social media to be part of the conversation this evening. Tonight we're in Lockerbie. Next week we're going to be in Glenrothes in Fife. So if you'd like to come along and be part of the audience for that show, go to the website bbc.co.uk/debate night. Let's go to our second question of the night, which comes from Neil Campbell. Neil, evening.
After reading reports and watching news from the conference over the weekend, my question is, has the SNP made a bold strategic move or a risky gamble by linking a May election win to a second independence referendum?
Thank you, Neil. John Swinney told the SNP conference that winning majority of seats in next May's Holyrood election would be a mandate for independence, using the precedent of what happened back in 2011. Monica Lennon, you abstained in a Holyrood vote on independence, second independence referendum. Where do you sit on this now?
Well, I think the question is a key one, and we've just had a discussion about the SNP government's competence and record, and I think what's happening is that John Swinney and the SNP don't want the election in May next year to be about their record after 18 years. It's no surprise the SNP want to talk about independence. That's what they were set up to do.
Well, so does the questioner. The question is about independence.
But the idea that next year's election should be about whether people want to have a referendum or not, that's really a misuse of that election, because the issues that we're discussing tonight about the state of our NHS, the housing crisis, we'll go on to other issues. When I knock on doors or go into my local community, that's what people are talking about, regardless of how they feel about the Constitution. And that's why I know there's plenty of people in my local area who could be persuaded to vote independence or do believe in it, but they're going to vote for Labour in that election next year. So it's up to John Swinney what calculation he wants to make. But I think they want to distract away from their record on the NHS, on housing, on ferries and so much more.
If they get a majority next May, the SNP, should they get a second independence referendum?
The SNP are not going to get a majority.
That's not the question
year.
I asked you, Monica. If they get it.
Well, I don't think they will, and I don't think that's the way to get a referendum. So they shouldn't get a referendum on that basis. People vote in a general election for lots of different reasons, and let's remember, the SNP are not the only party in Scotland to have a pro-independence agenda. The fact that the SNP and the other pro-indie parties can't even agree amongst themselves, I don't think we should make this the issue about the election. But that's for those parties to argue that. What Scottish Labour will be arguing for is the very future of our NHS, is to end the housing crisis, is to make sure we have ferries that can run on time, is to get jobs and manufacturing back in Scotland, to deal with the climate crisis, to deal with the environmental crisis, to make sure that we have a fairer country.
OK, this will be decided by the people next May. Let's hear from the man in the back row with the moustache. Yeah.
I keep on hearing this from the Labour Party and the Tories, right? We are the people of Scotland. It should be up to us to decide what we want to do, not Keir Starmer. I don't like it. It's our choice.
Thank you. Lady on the aisle down here. Yes.
So how do we go about getting a referendum if you don't do it that way? What is the way to get a referendum?
I'll put that question in just a second. Man on the other side of the aisle. Yes, on you go.
We've already had one. We've had it 11 years. I'm sick to the back teeth of these nationalists blindly following the SNP The SNP, as Monica said, the track record is abysmal and everyone blindly follows them for this nationalist agenda. We need to focus on the real issues of the Scottish people and not... And the thing is as well, the other thing, they want to not be ruled by Westminster and then be led by Brussels. It doesn't make sense.
Finlay Carson, to answer that lady's point, what is the route to a second independence referendum in Scotland?
We've got to look back, and the dial hasn't changed at all since the referendum. We haven't got any more support in Scotland than we had back then. So still the majority of people in Scotland want to remain part of the Union. What I would prefer, and I'm sure the majority of people in Scotland would prefer, is the First Minister concentrating on getting the economy back on track, improving our health system, improving our education. And it's no surprise that John Swinney wants to talk about independence again, because as Monica Lennon says, it's to deflect away from the failures of this 18-year-old and out of ideas, tired SNP government.
Well, what he says he's doing, Finlay, is using the precedent of what happened the last time when the independence referendum was granted. David Cameron said in May 2014, I did what I thought was the right thing, which was to say, you voted for a party that wants independence, you should have a referendum that is legal, that is decisive and fair. The words of David Cameron, Conservative leader and Prime Minister. What's different this time?
Well, we hear every election when it suits the SNP that it's going to be the de facto referendum. We heard that just a few months ago when we had the Westminster elections, and soon that discussion about whether our Westminster election was going to be de facto when we saw the SNP almost wiped out in Scotland. I think we need to reflect on that. But there's nobody on the doorsteps talking about independence. Everybody's talking about the SNP having 18 years, having their eye off the ball when it comes to education, to health, to drug deaths, and that's what they want to concentrate on. Maybe if the SNP had concentrated on that over the next 18 years, they would have moved the dial, but they haven't. There is no more people voting for Scotland to be independent than there was back when we had the referendum. Nothing has changed apart from Scotland going back in the league tables in health and education and the economy. That is the facts of the matter.
Sean McDonald, bold, risky move. How do you see it?
Well, I don't think it's going to surprise anybody. We obviously expect that the SNP are going to go down the independence route. I just kind of wanted to pick up on something you had said there, that nothing has changed. Everything has changed. The landscape is unrecognisable from what it once was. We were told in order to remain in the European Union, there had to be a no vote. The opposite happened. Energy prices to be protected and to stay manageable, you had to vote no for that to happen. The opposite had happened. I think to pick up on the point about wanting to be ruled by Brussels as opposed to being ruled by Westminster, I think one is a voluntary union, or a voluntary part of the European Union, which I think benefits a lot of people. But ultimately, it is for the Scottish people to decide. And when we get to the polling booths, we will see what Scotland has decided. I think the SNP probably have to. This probably is their last roll of the dice. They have been in power for a long time. I have said that I think maybe it's a wee bit too long for any one party to be in charge. However, as I said, it's the people that decide, and if the people vote for them, then that's the outcome and that's the result.
Thank you. Man with the glasses in the front row. Yes.
I take exception to the Conservative individual sitting there telling me that nothing has changed since 2011. Since then, 1 million more young voters have joined the register. And if you think they are going to vote for Westminster, you must be needing another thought.
The dial in public opinion hasn't changed. There is no more support for independence now than there was when we had the referendum. Yep, I absolutely agree. The landscape has changed. Maybe we didn't make that clear, but the desire for Scotland to be independent has not increased over that time.
You must be looking at a different poll from me, sir.
I think what we're now looking at as well is the importation of Trumpist politics, however you call it, Trump's America, into our political system. And I think we're now faced with a choice, a very realistic possibility of Nigel Farage being in number 10. And I think that, I don't think Scotland are going to react in entirely the same way that we see England maybe embracing that a wee bit more. I mean, I don't think we can trust anything that comes out of Nigel Farage's mouth, but some people are taken in by it.
Right, well, Thomas Kerr's here from Reform UK tonight. Are you the secret weapon for independence? Will you be what tips it over the edge?
Boris Johnson was a secret weapon. Brexit was a secret weapon. Everything was a secret weapon to try and get independence. The reality is the union is much bigger than any individual politician. Now, this nonsense about Nigel Farage is absolute rubbish. Reform UK is currently polling second place in Scotland, and communities that have never voted for a party like Reform UK, like mine and Shettleston, are now looking at people like Reform. So that idea that somehow Scotland is immune and Scotland doesn't want to talk about reform and Scotland doesn't like Nigel Farage is absolute nonsense. The reality is the union, as I say, is much bigger than any individual politician.
Is it a voluntary union? Is it a voluntary union? And if the SNP get a majority next May, should that trigger a second independence referendum?
Well, look, they will not get a majority next May. I am absolutely certain that. What this is a desperate plea by the First Minister to rally up his base. That's
is
what
it a voluntary union that we are in, Thomas?
It is, but the people of Scotland had a say in 2014. They decided to vote no. I know that there'll be some people in this audience who disagrees with that, but that is what the people of Scotland decided. And every single time, it's not that there's no more.
No, I was going to say no more general elections in that case.
No,
things change.
Things
change and we have an opportunity to revisit them.
Sean, there's a huge difference between a general election, which is electing a government to deal with a whole range of issues like the GP crisis we were just talking about, like education, like the economy, and an independence referendum, which we were told at the time was once in a generation, once in a lifetime. There's a totally different argument there. And when the people of Scotland want a referendum, that's up to the people of Scotland. But what we're seeing in opinion polls is not that.
How will
because
you
you can see it in opinion polls. Look, the top three issues people want to decide the Holyrood election on right now is health, the cost of living and immigration. The issue of independence is not there. I'm champing on doors. I speak to people daily. Independence does not come up other than people who are SNP politicians. That's the only people who are pushing for
everyone,
this.
hang on a second. I want to hear loads of hands up in the audience. I want to hear from people here. A lady on the edge, right up there. Yeah, on you go.
Hi, thank you. In 2014, Scotland was lied to. We were told we would stay in Brexit. We were told there was no more oil in the North Sea. So why lie? Why are Scotland, the people, not allowed to choose what they want?
Thank you. Man in the check shirt on the aisle. Yes, on you go. Yeah,
me.
You. Yes.
Aye, sorry. Yes, thank you. Why is it only the SNP that's wanting Scotland to be independent? Lots of other governments or parties, they might want Scotland to be independent, not just the SNP. And as we were told that we would stay in Brexit if we didn't vote for independence.
Stay in the EU.
In the EU, sorry, yeah.
Emma Harper, bold move by the First Minister. Nicola Sturgeon says it's going to be very, very difficult to achieve this majority. Is she right?
The people in Scotland are sovereign, so the people in Scotland should have the right to choose their own future. It's the reason why we argue for independence is because that means full fiscal levers. It means full control over the immigration needs that we have, which are different to immigration in England. We need people to move to this country to help support our NHS and help support social care and help support hospitality, for instance. We have different demographics in this country. There's so much to unpick with what everybody has said about Brexit. We didn't want Brexit, but we got it anyway. And it has caused businesses millions of pounds. What a calamity what it has caused. Things have changed. There's been material changes. We have the rise of the right wing. Every party in Westminster are now moving towards the right, the main parties, even Labour. Monica, I'm sure you do not agree with the policies that are being taken forward in Westminster by Labour, and certainly the Conservatives are even lurching towards the right as well. The people in Scotland don't want right-wing governments. They want something that's fair and equal, that helps support people out of poverty. We can't get people out of poverty if we don't have the full fiscal levers to do that. You know, normal countries manage their own budgets, manage their own functions, and if this is a voluntary union, what is the way out of it then?
The idea that Scotland is not a normal country. We absolutely are a normal country. I find that quite offensive, and I absolutely respect people with different views.
I mean, a normal independent country. Self-governing countries can choose for themselves the policy policies and procedures they want to take forward.
That's
what it's
tell
about.
Emma, what is the route to it then? What is the route to a second independence referendum? If it's not next May, what is it?
Well, the reality is, and not everyone in this room or watching at home agrees, but the reality is this is not the priority right now for the people in Scotland. If it was, people would be marching on the streets. We would see it reflected in election results.
So why not just tell them?
It's not
Why
the
not
case.
just tell them what
and
the
I think,
route is?
you know, I'll agree with Nicola Sturgeon on the point that she made, that this is a gamble. And I'm afraid, I think that we've got John Swinney marching SNP supporters to the top of the hill again, just to disappoint them. And just remember back in 2014, where there was a vibrant campaign for independence. There's no denying that. But you had a unified campaign where you had people that were SNP, Green, other parties, people of no party, and there was a unified yes movement, if you want to call it that. That no longer exists. These parties can't agree amongst themselves.
John Swinney signed a memorandum of understanding with Gordon McIntyre Kemp and the Believe in Scotland folks.
The Alba
This
Party,
is about people choosing independence for themselves. And the polls are actually turning as well. There are more people that want to at least have a choice.
Okay.
This is what it's about. It's not a de facto referendum.
But that doesn't matter. If Labour say no, Reform say no, the Conservatives say no, what do you do then?
I go back to if this is a voluntary union, what is the way out then?
Can I just say one thing quickly, Stephen, just very quickly? This is what John Swinney wants. He does not want this audience or anybody at home debating his record. He wants to talk about the same arguments we had almost a decade ago. I'm fed up hearing this. Let's talk about education, the economy and health, and let's stop talking about the past.
We do have other topics to talk about this evening. Hashtag is BBCDN on social media to get involved in the conversation. Let's go to the third question of the night, which comes from Ashley Marshall. Ashley, evening.
Hi, thank you. Some politicians blame immigrants and asylum seekers for economic problems. How will you challenge this narrative while addressing people's real concerns?
Thank you, Ashley. Thomas Kerr, do you blame immigrants and asylum seekers for Scotland's economic problems?
No, I absolutely don't. What I have said and what my party is very clear on is that this country at the moment is at a standpoint. We're at breaking point with the number of people who are coming into this country illegally, and that has to be solved. And people in Scotland are seeing that themselves. That's why it is the third biggest issue that people want to talk about in terms of opinion polling. So it's not about blaming somebody. It's not about saying to people that they're not welcome. What it's about saying is that Britain, as a country, has to stop taking in everybody and trying to get control of our own borders. That's what this is about, and that's what the people of Scotland are coming. And that's why Reform's doing so well in the polls, I would say.
Where do you think the majority of them are coming from?
I don't know. That's the whole point. We don't know where they're coming because they're coming illegally, and many of the documents when they come to this country are thrown away. So we don't know where they're coming from. We don't know who they are. We don't know what age they are properly. That's the whole point. We need to control our borders like any other country does across the world.
Absolutely, yeah, we should be in control of them. What we have is the architect of Brexit, Nigel Farage, who's responsible for these boats coming over. There used to be return agreements. And as a result of Brexit, which Nigel Farage was the one he was the architect of it. That's why we now have this issue. And what's happened is it's been magnified, and people are being blamed. Minorities are being blamed. There are people who are coming here with nothing, and regardless of the fact why they're coming or what they're getting or what they're not getting, aside from that, that's now filtering into friends of mine. A friend of mine, Artie, a Scottish Indian woman, very proud Scottish Indian woman, has been spat at in the street. She's been abused. We talked about it in the podcast. These are real issues that are now filtering through. And if we bring it all the way back, the boats are being used as this stick to beat the current government with. They're being used as this is the issue. These people are not the cause of high petrol prices. They're not the cause of energy prices being through the roof. They're not the cause of all of our ills. And I think it's very convenient for the opposition and the people in power to look at these people and blame them, because do you know what happens? We're not scrutinising them, and they're the reason for all of the ills that we're facing.
Ashley, you asked the question. What do you think?
Yeah, so your Reform candidate there is saying that they're not saying that they're to blame. You're not telling them they're not welcome. That's exactly what you're saying. That's exactly what your leader is saying. They are putting this narrative out for people who are desperate for change and desperate for better, and you're pointing their anger at the wrong place.
There is nothing more insulting. There is nothing more insulting than telling the public they are wrong. What Reform is doing, and what the other parties, first to Labour and to the Conservatives, is they are reacting to an issue that the public are raising themselves. This is not just to do with Reform UK.
The public are being manipulated, Thomas.
Well, it's good for them now, yeah, that's it. How
The
dare the public think themselves?
The public
How
are being manipulated.
They must agree with everything that you have ever said in your political life. That's nonsense.
No, it's not nonsense. People are being manipulated, and there's a
to say to my constituents in Shettleston that they're being manipulated by people is the most insulting thing that you can say to someone.
There is a miss.
They are raising concerns because right now, the city that me and you were born in Glasgow is at breaking point. The city that me and you were born in has a housing crisis.
That's the fault of somebody fleeing war.
We are the asylum capital of Britain. We cannot continue the way that we are. And to insult someone and saying that they are simply being manipulated for raising a concern is absolutely
Okay, hold that thought for a second, guys. Hold that thought for a second. Let me go to the guy in the back row. Yeah, on you go.
Right. Right-wing politicians, and I include Labour in that, are saying that the people coming across from the continent on small boats are illegal, but nobody is illegal because under the Refugees Convention, anybody who comes has to, and puts in a claim for asylum, it has to be processed. As soon as they do that, they're not illegal. They can't be, because if they were illegal, they would be removed from this country. They are not the cause of any of the problems of this country. The problems of this country are due to the failure to, over the years of UK governments, to put enough money into housing, health, education, and that's because the rich don't pay their taxes. Massive amounts are lost every year. 39.8 billion in the last year that we got figures for was lost in unpaid taxes, according to HMRC. So
get the priorities right.
Totally false to claim that immigrants are causing problems.
Okay, thank you. Man on this side of the room, on the left. Yes, on you go.
I think it's disingenuous to suggest that you're not shaping the narrative to focus the public on small boats. It's only a small proportion of the overall immigration figures that come into the UK, and that's being demonised. It's an othering of people who are in that out group, and it's classic populist politics. If before Brexit we had the Dublin Accords, we didn't have a small boats problem. So it's Brexit has created that for us, and it's creating a narrative that's being capitalised on, that you're distinctly trying to shape the focus of the debate on a small proportion of that overall immigration burden.
Thank you. I want to take a couple more voices. Man on the towards the back. Yes, on you go.
Yeah, I was wondering if any of the politicians in front of us would talk about the skilled worker visas and whether they would bring those back and let people in rather than kicking them out.
Thank you. We'll pick that up in just a second. Last one, though. This lady right in the middle, on the middle. Yeah, there you go.
When we're talking about being at breaking point, the people coming in small boats represent about half a football stadium. Half a football stadium across the UK doesn't strike me as breaking point. If we spent the billions and billions that we spend on trying to deter people on our communities that are run down, then we might create more jobs, not only for refugees coming in when they do get their refugee status, which most people do legitimately, we'd also create jobs for people already living here.
Thank you. Monica Lennon, you said independence is not something that comes up on the doorsteps. Is this subject coming up on the doorsteps? You're out campaigning now.
Yeah, I'll be honest about that. Immigration is coming up on the doors more often now than it used to. But I think that is partly because people are being fed a diet through TikTok, certain social media platforms, GB News. I've knocked on a door when someone's had GB News on the background and your leader Nigel's just been on it, and they tell me something that I think I'll have to go and check that out. It's probably not quite accurate. But look, the issue that we have in our country is that our economy is broken and people don't feel well off at all. We've got more and more food banks opening. We've got poverty increasing when it should be going in the other direction.
Well, you're the government south of the border,
well,
weren't you going to do something about that?
Here in Scotland, well, at the weekend I was writing in a newspaper column about how we need to deal with this, both governments working together, but we need to, we can't always say, oh, it's because we had 14 years of the Tories, but we did have 14 years of Tory austerity, and a Labour government can't come in and undo 14 years in 14 months. Do I want the UK Labour government to go further and faster to end poverty? Of course I do. But we need to make sure the economy works for everyone. One of my problems with Reform UK is that they are giving you the big picture about here's what we think the problems are, but they don't really have the solutions. What we need to do is to get more money into the pockets of working people, but what Reform UK did in Westminster was they voted against that. They vote against the increase to the minimum wage. They vote against improved workers' rights. But I think when we have these discussions, what we need to do as politicians is make sure we're not lumping everything together and have a discussion about small boats, asylum seekers and refugees, and then talking about immigration more generally. Earlier on, we talked about our concern about skilled workers leaving Scotland, doctors, nurses, other workers.
That brings us to the visa point.
And then it's about what is the skills mismatch in our country. And that brings us back to how we actually invest in education in our own country and make sure that the economy does work for everyone. But I'm afraid Reform UK are scapegoating immigrants. And the point that Sean made about people experiencing racism and seeing hate crime, it's Hate Crime Awareness Week, that's an issue that I've seen locally. I had a woman who's been living in the community for 20 years. She's an architect, she's involved in some really important projects to get new healthcare facilities. Her husband works in a university, she has a family, they're being productive, if that's the right way to put it. But she's originally from Turkey, and she now goes into the supermarket and people are making racist comments to her. And she's been contributing to our society for a very long time. That's deeply unpleasant. I don't think anyone in this room or in the audience at home would want that.
Of course not. But we know in this room that we've got people who've told us that they would support reform here this evening. So when you're listening to this, do you think the politicians are missing something here in terms of their responses? Man on the aisle here. Yeah, on you go.
Yeah. Rachel Reeves says that for immigrants to come here, you have to have A+ in English. How many people in here have got A+ in English?
And man on the third row. Yeah, on you go.
I think, I don't think it should be controversial to say that we should put British and Scottish people first, and I don't think it should be. And I think the thing is as well, I think we do ourselves a disservice when we say that this country and the NHS runs on or was built on immigration. It wasn't. It was built by hard-working British, Scottish men and women with a small contribution from immigration, not the uncontrolled immigration that we're currently seeing at the moment.
Finlay Carson, what are you seeing on the doorsteps in terms of this being an issue for next May's election?
It is an issue, or it's a perceived issue. And I think Monica touched on it and Sean has done so as well. So knocking on the doors in Dumfries, every second door there's someone who's got an opinion on immigration. Some positive, some negative. Some feel that they don't want to go in the town centre in Dumfries anymore. And now that might be because they've heard it from someone else and maybe not experienced that. So it is an issue and we need to address it. We need to recognise the difference between illegal immigration and immigration that we need. I think we've had net migration in Scotland of round about 53,000 last year, and of that, 3/4 was from overseas. Now we need that immigration. But we need to make sure that people who are coming to Scotland are going to work, they're going to pay their taxes, and they're going to be part of the community, because that's really, really important. And someone touched on the skilled worker visa. I think that's incredibly important down in Dumfries and Galloway, where we have an agricultural industry that has, for the last few years, depended on skilled workers. But what we should also be concentrating on is that we've got 100,000 people in Scotland unemployed at the moment. We need to be doing our hardest to get those people into work. And we're not seeing a government enabling that at the moment, because we're seeing things like apprenticeships and college places cut So we're not giving young people the opportunity to take up some of these jobs. You know, if you're a dairy farmer in Wigtonshire, you're getting paid £35,000, £40,000. That's a good, well-paid job. But the moment we're having to, or well, until Labour, who for some apparent reason have got it in for our agricultural community, they've taken away the ability for farmers to bring in workers, skilled workers from overseas to do these jobs. But equally so, we don't have that career, the training pathway to get young folk in Scotland in to milk the cows in Wigtonshire, and that needs to be addressed as well. So there's a whole range of different issues, but to say that immigration is not a problem is probably a bit naive, because it is, because we're hearing it on the doorstep, but we need to approach it in a proper measured way.
Sean McDonald?
Yeah, I kind of wanted to come in there and say, yeah, you're absolutely right. We should be able to have a sensible, grown-up conversation about immigration, how it benefits us, and there have to be maybe certain criteria that you have to meet. I was the beneficiary of being able to move to Spain when I was 22. The things that did for my life, and for me as a person, incredible. And I now see that we're at this point where the ills, like, people are right to be angry. You're right to be absolutely raging that costs are going up and the quality of life is going down. But in the face of everybody I see getting the blame for this, I see the face of my Polish friends who once upon a time, not that long ago, they were to blame for everything. They were the Daily Mail headline. Before that, it was my ancestors that came over from Ireland. And I cannot, while I have this opportunity, I cannot stand by and not make the point that if your life is not going the way that you want it, it is not somebody that's doing a lot worse than you that's to blame for it. And that's what I wanted to express.
Thank you. Young man right in the middle. Yes.
Can I just say, if Reform UK isn't blaming immigrants for the issues that we're facing, why is it their headline policy that is on social media?
Thank you. I'll pick that up in just a second. A man in the white top, though, in the second row. When you go.
If immigration is such a non-existent problem, why is there parts of our cities that are like, you just can't enter because they're so full of immigrants?
Which ones, please, can you specify?
Birmingham, London, Manchester.
Which areas have you been spending?
When you say you can't enter them, what do you mean?
It's not safe to go in. I mean, I used to drive lorries in this country, and there's certain parts of certain cities in this country you just didn't go into because your lorry would just get opened up and stolen, and the contents stolen.
I think the lady next to you wants to say something.
Well, we have an ageing population in Scotland, so we need immigration. And it's so we need a different policy than down south. That's the case for independence. Let's be in charge of our own borders in Scotland.
Emma Harper.
So people will say our country is full of immigrants. You know, there are 4 different countries in this union. Scotland has different needs. We have heard already that we have an older population, so we need a tailored immigration approach that suits us in Scotland. You know, I was a migrant worker when I worked in Los Angeles. I was a foreigner who went over to America because they needed economic migrants. My husband's an immigrant, and I'm wondering if Nigel Farage wants to kick him out of the country because he pays his taxes, he employs people, and he has a job. So we really need to look at it in terms of how do we manage it for ourselves. So that is one of the arguments for independence, Stephen, is so that we have control over our own policy.
That's a question for Emma Harper. Why is Scotland not attracting immigrants at the moment? It's because we don't have an attractive tax policy. We're failing in education. We've got a failing health service. We could be getting more people who are immigrating to south of the border over here, but we don't.
So most people in Scotland pay less tax than elsewhere in the UK. The higher taxpayers are paying more. You're talking about maybe a band 7 registered nurse. That's not the others. Social care workers, which we do need in Scotland, are actually being prevented from working because of the UK government's policy with sponsoring these people to work. So if we attract care workers to Scotland, they won't be in the highest tax bracket. Okay. But we want to make sure that we have a policy, again, that suits us in Scotland. That's why we need to have control over our own policies.
Final word on this man in the back row, right in the middle. He's just put his hand down. Yeah, on you go.
it's quite unique to Lockerbie that we have a Ukrainian POW camp. Well, it's not there now, but after the Second World War. So we've always had, even in a small community like this, we've always had immigrants. I've worked for 30 years with what are perceived to be immigrants, and they have, in the main, been fantastic people. I've been amazed by it. So we absolutely need immigration in the right way.
Thomas Kerr.
With skills.
But I totally agree with that last part. I am sitting here as a politician who's saying that we have to tackle the issue of illegal migration. That's part of the question that the gentleman at the back had asked me about why it was our #1 policy online. It's to tackle illegal migration. It's not to deal with the people who have came here, who have contributed, and the people who we need. Emma says that what we need is a tailored immigration approach in Scotland. No, we don't. What we need is to have a tailored system that makes sure that healthcare workers and care workers feel as if they are properly rewarded. That's about looking at wages. We need to make sure we're funding college places and skills and apprenticeships, which is something that Emma's government has cut.
For the NHS, I mean, reform would bring in a US-style
that is
insurance system.
Monica, this is rubbish.
Well, that's what
we went through this last time we sat on this debate. This is absolute nonsense. It is lies. It is utter lies that you're telling the audience, and you should be absolutely ashamed of yourself for punting out lies to the public about this.
Back to the audience.
NHS
Man in the blue shirt. Hang on. The man in the second row. Yes, on you go.
2 points. I think one of the main problems is the way that these guys have been distributed around the country. You've chosen to fill a hotel in every town with people that are given no ability to go and work. They're being held hostage in a community. So I think that's one place which is you've gone seriously wrong. You've upset so many communities across the UK by banging them all in a hotel here, there and everywhere. The second thing is that none of you have alluded to is the fact that we have a problem about bringing skilled workers, nurses, doctors and things into this area is we have a housing crisis, which Labour are failing to assess.
OK, thank you.
Housing's evolved.
Yeah.
It's an SNP government.
Lady with the glasses in the middle.
I just wanted to make a point that I used to live in Kent where Nigel Farage stood on the beaches pointing out all the boats. I never felt scared or unsafe in any area in Kent because of immigrants.
Thank you. Monica Lennon, do you think this is going to be a major issue for you, for Labour, at the next election in May?
Immigration. Well, earlier on, independence was going to be the big issue. Now it's immigration. I think, based on what I hear on the doors, what I hear colleagues saying, including all the parties, it's the NHS, it's housing, it's education. It's about how we get that fairer economy, it's how we get our public service into good shape. That's what people are raising.
Right.
And these are not side issues, not dismissing it, but it's what are the deeper issues?
OK, well, we'll be talking about them right up to next May on debate night. We're done here in Lockerbie for tonight. We're going to be next week in Glenrothes next Wednesday. Have a look at the website. Week after that's Aberdeen as well, if you want to come along to those shows. If you missed any of tonight, you can watch us again on BBC One Scotland right after the news, 10:45, or you can catch it any time that suits you on the BBC iPlayer. Thank you very much indeed to my panel here tonight and to a brilliant audience here in Lockerbie, and to you at home for watching wherever you happen to be. See you next week. In the meantime, stay safe, stay well. From all of us in Debate Night, good night.